Jake Brennan had been standing in the same spot for 3 hours, watching a Voltarian delegate argue about seating arrangements, and he was pretty sure his soul had left his body around the 2-hour mark. This was what his life had become. This was what 20 years of combat experience got you in the Galactic confluence, babysitting duty at the single most boring diplomatic summit in the known universe, on a station so fancy it had gold-plated trash compactors, Celestia Prime. Even the name made him want to take a nap. He shifted his weight, adjusted his earpiece, and contemplated every life choice that had led him here. The pay was decent. The work was mind-numbing. It was, technically, better than getting shot at. Technically. That's when the doors at the far end of the Grand Hall exploded open. Not literally exploded, though that would have been more interesting. They simply opened with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested someone very important and very annoying was about to enter. Prince Valerix of the Kryn Empire strode in like he was personally blessing everyone with his presence. And oh, he was everything the briefing packet had promised. 8 feet tall, crystalline blue skin that shimmered in the light, wearing enough ceremonial armor to stock a museum, and a cape. An actual cape. In space. In the year 2847, the guy was committed to the aesthetic. Jake had to give him that. Behind Valerix came a parade of servants, guards, and what appeared to be someone whose only job was to announce his titles. The announcer was still going. He'd been listing titles for 45 seconds. Jake counted. Station Commander Reese appeared at Jake's elbow, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Join the club, Commander." "Brennan, you're on Prince Valerix." Jake blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Protection detail. Stay within 20 feet. Keep him alive. Try not to let him start a war. Commander, I've read the file on this guy. He's got 12 of his own royal guards. Very shiny guards. Very armed guards. Guards who actually want to be here." Reese smiled the smile of someone passing along a terrible problem. "Prince Valerix specifically requested a human bodyguard. Something about proving humans are beneath Kryn royalty. He wants you close so he can, and I quote, demonstrate the superiority of his warrior lineage. So I'm a prop." "You're a very well-paid prop. Don't screw this up." She walked away before Jake could argue. Professional woman, that Commander Reese, knew exactly when to retreat. Jake sighed, checked his sidearm, and made his way toward the prince, who was currently holding court near the fountain. The crystalline fountain. That shot liquid light instead of water. Because of course it did. Valerix spotted him approaching, and his eyes, which were literally glowing, narrowed with what could only be described as aristocratic disdain. "Ah, the human." Valerix's voice boomed across the hall. "Everything this guy did was at maximum volume. I am told you will be shadowing me during this tedious summit." "How?" "Quaint." Jake stopped at a respectful distance. "Your Highness, I'll try to stay out of your way." "See that you do. I require no protection from a species that only discovered faster than light travel 3 centuries ago. My people were building empires when yours were still hitting each other with rocks. We got pretty good at the rock hitting, actually. Really refined the technique." Valerix stared at him, uncertain if he was being mocked. Jake kept his expression perfectly neutral. 20 years of military discipline had some benefits. The prince turned away with a dismissive wave. "Simply stay quiet and try not to embarrass yourself, human. I have important diplomatic matters to attend to." Jake watched Valerix stride toward a cluster of delegates, cape billowing behind him, and felt a familiar tingle at the base of his skull. The one that showed up right before things went sideways. This was going to be a very long summit. And judging by the way Valerix was already gesturing dramatically while talking to Ambassador Fleck from the Grolvian Trade Consortium, it was going to get interesting way faster than anyone wanted. Jake settled into his stance, hands clasped loosely in front of him, eyes scanning the room with practiced efficiency. Just another day in paradise. It took Prince Valerix exactly 17 minutes to insult his first ambassador. Jake timed it. Ambassador Fleck was a Grolvian, which meant he looked like someone had crossed a toad with a business suit and given the result a really bad attitude. Grolvians were known for 3 things across the galaxy: their trading networks, their impeccable memory, and their ability to hold grudges that outlasted stellar formations. Valerix, apparently, had not read that particular memo. "Your trade proposals are as bloated as your species' mating sacs," the prince announced loud enough for half the hall to hear. Perhaps if the Grolvian Consortium spent less time inflating their own importance and more time actually producing quality goods, your economy wouldn't be circling the drain of irrelevance. Jake closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Just long enough to wonder if he could fake a medical emergency and get reassigned. Fleck's face had turned from its usual swamp green to a disturbing shade of purple. His throat sac inflated. That was bad. Jake had seen enough Grolvian negotiations to know that an inflated throat sac meant someone was about to have a very bad day, either now or 6 months from now when you least expected it. "Your Highness," Flex said, with the kind of calm that preceded violence, "the Grolvian people have long memories. Then perhaps you'll remember this conversation when your consortium finally learns some humility." Valerix shot back, already turning away to find his next victim. Jake stepped forward, keeping his voice low. "Your Highness, maybe we could dial back the diplomacy by insult. Approach." Valerix glanced at him like he'd forgotten Jake existed. "I am conducting affairs of state, human. Your primitive understanding of galactic politics is neither required nor desired." "Right. Sure. Just so you know, Grolvians typically respond to insults by hiring professionals. The kind with guns. Then they will face the might of the Kryn Empire's justice." Valerix patted the ornate plasma sword at his hip. "This blade has been passed down through 17 generations of my family. It has never tasted defeat." Jake looked at the sword. Beautiful weapon. Probably cost more than a small planet. Also probably never been drawn in actual combat, based on how pristine the energy core housing looked. "How many times have you personally used that in a fight, Your Highness?" Valerix drew himself up to his full 8 feet. "A prince does not sully himself with common brawling. Combat is an art form, a dance of honor and skill, not the crude violence you humans engage in." "Cool. Good to know." Jake's eyes were already tracking the room. 3 of Fleck's security team had shifted position. Not obvious, not dramatic, just a casual drift toward better angles of attack. One had his hand near his coat. Another was speaking quietly into a comm device. This was textbook pre-assassination positioning. Jake had seen it a dozen times, performed it himself twice during his peacekeeper days. He moved closer to Valerix, scanning exit routes. The main doors were too exposed. The service entrance behind the buffet table was partially blocked. The emergency exits were clear, but 60 feet away through a crowd. Valerix was now explaining to a Centaurian delegate why their culture's poetry was derivative and uninspired. The Centaurian's scales were bristling. Jake added her security team to his mental threat assessment list. "Your Highness," Jake tried again, "maybe we should relocate to somewhere more private." "Nonsense. The grand banquet begins in 1 hour. I intend to make an entrance that these lesser species will remember for generations." "Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of." Valerix finally looked at him. Really looked at him. "You seem nervous, human. Is this your first real assignment? Perhaps you're overwhelmed by the grandeur of actual civilization." Jake met his eyes. "I'm nervous because you've insulted 6 different ambassadors, 3 of whom represent species that consider assassination a legitimate political tool, and your security team is too busy looking pretty to notice that we're currently being surrounded." Valerix laughed. Actually laughed. "Surrounded? By whom? These delegates are bound by summit protocols. Violence is forbidden in Celestia Prime's diplomatic zones." "Right, and I'm sure everyone follows the rules all the time. That's definitely how the universe works." But Valerix had already moved on, spotting another delegate to enlighten with his opinions. Jake sighed and shifted his stance, keeping Valerix in his peripheral vision while tracking Fleck's security team. They were getting into position, professional spacing, overlapping fields of fire. The banquet was in 58 minutes. Jake gave it 20 before things went sideways. He was off by 3 minutes. The banquet hall was exactly the kind of place where people got murdered while holding fancy drinks. Vaulted ceilings decorated with nebula projections. Tables arranged in concentric circles around a central stage. Floating serving drones carrying hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than Jake's monthly salary. And approximately 200 diplomats, delegates, and staff, any one of whom could be carrying weapons the scanners wouldn't detect. Jake hated it immediately. Valerix, naturally, loved it. He'd positioned himself at the head table, holding court like he was personally responsible for the existence of fine dining. His royal guards flanked him at a respectful distance, looking ceremonial and about as tactically useful as decorative throw pillows. Jake stood 10 feet back, hands loose at his sides, watching everything. Fleck's security team had split up. Smart. Harder to track. 1 was near the bar. 2 were positioned by separate entrances. The 4th had disappeared entirely, which was the most concerning thing of all. "You know," Valerix announced to the Centaurian ambassador seated next to him, "your species' insistence on ceremonial molting rituals is quite possibly the most inefficient cultural practice I've encountered. Have you considered simply evolving past it?" The ambassador's scales rippled in barely contained rage. Jake mentally updated his threat assessment list. Again. That's when he spotted the missing 4th security guard. Service entrance. heading toward the kitchen access tunnel with 3 other figures Jake didn't recognize, all moving with the kind of purposeful stride that meant they had somewhere to be and someone to kill. Jake touched his earpiece. "Control, this is Brennan. We have a situation developing at the North Service entrance. Static." Then Commander Reese's voice, distorted. "Say again, Brennan? You're breaking up." Of course the comms were jammed. Professional job. These weren't amateurs. The lights dimmed for the ceremonial first course presentation. Perfect cover. Jake moved closer to Valerix, who was mid-sentence explaining why the Voltarian delegate's homeworld's architecture was aesthetically offensive. "Your Highness, we need to leave. Now. Don't be absurd. The meal is just beginning." The kitchen doors burst open. 6 figures, faces covered, weapons drawn, plasma rifles, molecular disruptors. One guy had what looked like a modified Kryn ceremonial blade, which was either ironic or really good planning. The room erupted into screaming chaos. Valerix stood, his chair toppling backward, and drew his plasma sword in one fluid motion. The blade ignited with a brilliant blue glow. He struck a pose that would have looked great on a propaganda poster. "Assassins! You dare strike at the crown prince of the Kryn Empire? Face me with honor and know that you have chosen death." One of the assassins aimed directly at Valerix's head. Jake yawned. Not a big dramatic yawn. Just a genuine, tired, been here done this yawn. He stepped forward, grabbed the butter knife from the table setting next to him, and threw it in one smooth motion. The knife hit the first assassin's trigger hand. The plasma bolt went wide, vaporizing a chandelier. Jake drew his sidearm, double-tapped the second assassin's center mass, pivoted, and put a round through the third assassin's knee. The guy went down screaming. Valerix was still holding his heroic pose, sword raised, battle cry half-formed. Jake grabbed a serving tray, used it to deflect fire from Assassin 4, closed the distance, and introduced the edge of the tray to the guy's windpipe. He crumpled. The 5th assassin tried to flank. Jake swept his leg, disarmed him with an elbow strike, and kicked his weapon across the polished floor. The 6th assassin, the one with the ceremonial blade, actually tried to engage Valerix in formal combat, stepped forward with a traditional Kryn challenge stance and everything. Jake shot him in the foot. The guy collapsed, screaming something about honor and protocols. Total elapsed time, 14 seconds. Jake stood there, sidearm still raised, scanning for additional threats. The banquet hall had gone completely silent, except for the groaning of wounded assassins and some distant alarms. Valerix slowly lowered his sword, staring at Jake like he'd just watched physics become optional. You didn't even let me fight." Jake holstered his weapon. "You're welcome. That was not honorable combat. That was effective?" More security was flooding in now. Jake pointed at the wounded assassins. These guys had inside help. Check the comms jamming and pull security footage from the service entrances. Valerix was still processing. "You used a butter knife." "Yeah, the salad fork was too light. Bad aerodynamics." Jake finally looked at the prince directly. "Your Highness, we need to move before whoever hired these guys sends the second team, and there's always a second team. But my sword, I didn't even— Your sword is very pretty. Can we discuss its aesthetic merits somewhere that isn't an active kill zone?" Jake reached down and picked up his own blade from where he'd dropped it during the fight, not the sidearm. His actual blade. A worn combat knife, standard issue from his peacekeeper days. Handle wrapped in frayed cord, blade notched and scarred from use. Valerix stared at it. "That looks like it's been through a war. 47 of them, actually." Jake tested the edge with his thumb. "Well, 47 people who drew fancy swords and made dramatic speeches while I was trying to keep someone alive. Worked out better for me than for them." He could hear more movement. The wrong kind. Not security. Wrong rhythm. Wrong coordination. Second team's here. "Your Highness, we're leaving. Now." For the first time since Jake had met him, Prince Valerix didn't argue. Smart guy. Once people started actually trying to kill him. Turns out, a royal prince fleeing for his life through maintenance shafts loses his dignity pretty quickly. "This is unacceptable," Valerix hissed as Jake dragged him through a waste disposal access tunnel. "I am royalty. I should not be crawling through refuse. It's recycling, not refuse." Big difference. Jake checked the corner. Weapon up. Clear. Keep moving. Behind them, plasma fire scorched the tunnel walls. The second team was persistent. Jake had to give them that. Sloppy, but persistent. They'd made it out of the banquet hall through the kitchen, past 3 security checkpoints that Jake had memorized during his initial station walkthrough, because that's what professionals did. Valerix's royal guards had tried to follow, Emphasis on tried. They were probably still arguing with station security about proper evacuation protocols. We should stand and fight, Valerix insisted, his cape catching on a pipe. He yanked it free, tearing the fabric. He looked personally offended by the damage. We should not stand and fight. We should run and live. Jake pulled him into a side corridor. Basic math. They've got numbers and position. We've got a cranky prince in my winning personality. I am not cranky. Your Highness, you insulted a guy's mother's mating sack. That's pretty much the definition of cranky. More plasma fire. Closer this time. Jake returned fire, dropped 2 more pursuit team members, and kept moving. The station's emergency systems were screaming now. Lockdown protocols engaging, which meant they had maybe 3 minutes before every door sealed, and they were trapped. Jake pulled Valerix down another shaft. This one dropped 6 feet. The prince landed in something that squished. What is this? Compost recycler. Don't think about it. I am literally standing in decomposed food matter. Better than decomposed prince matter. Move. They emerged into a cargo bay. Jake's cargo bay. Specifically, Bay 17, subsection Delta, where he'd parked his ship 3 days ago because he didn't trust station security, and always had an exit strategy. The ship sat there like a mechanical middle finger to good taste. Battered hull plating, mismatched thruster assemblies. A name stenciled on the side in faded letters. Reasonable doubt. Valerix stopped dead. That is your vessel? That is our ride out of here, unless you want to wait for Team 3. It looks like it was assembled from salvage. It was assembled from salvage. Very good salvage. Now get inside before someone shoots you in your royal face. Jake hit the ramp release. The ship's systems hummed to life. Not the most reassuring hum, more of a wheeze, but it moved. Valerix climbed aboard, still protesting. This violates every safety regulation in the Galactic Confluence Charter. So does assassinating diplomats. But here we are. Jake sealed the hatch, ran for the cockpit. Strap in. This is going to be ugly. The seats don't even have proper cushioning. The seats work, that's all they need to do. Jake fired up the engines. Station control was screaming at him over comms. Denied launch clearance. Violation of protocols. Threat of weapons lockdown. The usual. He launched anyway. The ship tore out of the bay, alarms shrieking. Station defense systems trying to get a target lock. Jake pulled a barrel roll that made the hull groan, and several warning lights flash. Behind them, 3 pursuit craft were scrambling to follow. They're following us! Valerix gripped his seat, knuckles crystalline white. Yeah, they do that. Jake punched the coordinates for a jump vector. Here's the thing about pursuit craft. They're built for speed. My ship's built for spite. He cut main thrust, fired reverse thrusters, let the pursuit craft overshoot, then dumped full power to the engines and dove under the station's defensive perimeter. Valerix made a sound that might have been a scream or might have been a prayer. Hard to tell. 2 pursuit craft collided, trying to follow the maneuver. The third managed to avoid them but lost visual tracking. Jake engaged the jump drive. Space folded, reality bent. The universe said, sure, whatever, and spat them out 3 systems away. Silence in the cockpit. Just the steady hum of engines and life support. Valerix slowly released his death grip on the seat. You are completely insane. I prefer creatively pragmatic. Jake checked their jump signature. Clean. No tracking. We're clear. For now. The prince looked around the cockpit, at the mismatched controls, the exposed wiring, the coffee stain on the navigation console that was definitely older than some civilizations. This ship should not function. And yet, Valerix was quiet for a moment. Then, you've done this before. Yeah, more times than I care to count. The butter knife, the escape route, all of it. You knew exactly what to do. Jake shrugged. It's the job. No. Valerix's voice had lost its theatrical boom. He sounded almost human. Almost. That wasn't just competence. That was experience. Real combat experience. Jake didn't answer immediately. He plotted a course to nowhere in particular, somewhere they could lay low while things cooled down. Your Highness, you want to know about my background? Fine. Let's talk. Valerix settled into the co-pilot seat, which protested with a concerning creak. He didn't seem to notice. His glowing eyes were fixed on Jake with an intensity that suggested he was finally paying attention. The sword, Valerix said quietly. You said it killed 47. You weren't exaggerating. Nope. Jake kept his eyes on the navigation display. Empty space. No pursuit signatures. Good. 47 people who thought fancy weapons and fancy titles meant they knew how to fight. They were wrong. Who were they? Jake leaned back. Let the autopilot handle the boring parts. Warlords. Champions. A couple of princes, actually. No offense. One particularly annoying pirate king who wouldn't shut up about his 12 dueling victories. Took him about 8 seconds to figure out. Dueling and actual combat are very different things. Valerix was quiet. Processing. Jake could almost see the gears turning behind those glowing eyes. You were military. Peacekeeper Corps. Earth's diplomatic solution after the rest of the galaxy spent about 50 years laughing at us. Humans, right? No natural armor. No enhanced strength. No energy projection. Just these squishy pink things that die if you look at them wrong. I've heard the stories. Earth was considered a joke species. Yeah, we were. Still are, in some sectors. Jake pulled up a star chart, mostly to have something to do with his hands. Problem was, everyone underestimated what happens when you take a species with no natural advantages and force them to get creative. We got very, very good at not dying. The Peacekeeper Corps was created to prove Earth's worth. The Peacekeeper Corps was created because Earth got tired of being the punchline. We weren't the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced, so we became the most efficient. 23 conflicts across 12 systems. That's my personal record. Everything from escort missions to full combat deployments. Valerix shifted in his seat. The cape was ruined, the armor scuffed. He looked less like a prince and more like someone who just had a very educational experience. The people your blade killed, they all underestimated you. They all underestimated humans. There's a difference. Jake finally looked at him. You know what Earth's big advantage is? We don't have honor-bound combat rituals. We don't have ceremonial weapons passed down through generations that never see real use. We have one rule: survive, whatever it takes. That sounds bleak. That sounds realistic. Your Highness, you drew that plasma sword tonight and struck a pose. Beautiful pose. Very heroic. Also completely useless. You know what I did? I grabbed the closest weapon and ended the threat. No ceremony, no honor, just results. Valerix looked down at his ornate sword, still hanging at his hip. This blade has been in my family for 17 generations. Has it been used in 17 generations? Silence. That answered that question. I thought not. Jake pulled up a damage report on the ship's systems. Minor hull scoring, nothing critical. Here's the thing about ceremonial weapons. They're for showing off. They're for making statements about tradition and legacy. They're not for keeping people alive. That's what working weapons are for. You think I'm a fool. I think you're a prince who's never been in real danger before today. That's not your fault. That's just what happens when you grow up with royal guards and protocols and people who tell you how special you are. Jake paused. But you listened when I said run. That took guts. A lot of royals I've worked with would rather die than admit they needed help. Valerix was quiet for a long moment. The ship hummed around them. Empty space stretched in all directions. 47, he finally said. 47 people learned too late that humans are dangerous. 47 people who thought being special made them safe. It doesn't. Being prepared makes you safe. Being willing to do ugly things to stay alive makes you safe. Everything else is just decoration. Is that why you left the Peacekeeper Corps? To do private security? I left because 23 conflicts was enough. I'd proven Earth's point. Humans aren't weak, we're just different. And different can be terrifying when it needs to be. Jake checked the chrono. We should be safe here for a few hours. After that, we'll need to figure out next steps. They'll send more assassins. Yeah. Fleck doesn't strike me as the forgiving type. Your insult about his mother probably didn't help. Valerix actually smiled. Just a small one. That was perhaps unwise. That was definitely unwise. Your Highness, quick question. Have you ever actually been in a fight? A real one? I've trained in Kryn combat. Art since I was young. That's a no. Jake stood, stretched. His back popped in 3 places. Combat arts are great, very structured, very impressive. Also very useless when someone's trying to put a plasma bolt through your skull. Real combat is ugly and fast and nothing like training. Then teach me. Jake stopped, turned. What? Teach me. Real combat. Human combat. Valerix stood as well, meeting Jake's eyes. I don't want to be helpless again. I don't want to stand there with my ceremonial sword while you do all the actual work. Show me how humans fight. Jake studied him. The prince looked sincere. Scared, maybe, but sincere. All right, lesson 1. Ditch the cape. It's a liability. Valerix hesitated, then unclasped the ruined cape and let it fall. Lesson 2. Your fancy sword stays sheathed until you actually know how to use it in real combat. Until then, you fight with whatever's available. And Lesson 3? Lesson 3. Stop insulting people's mothers. Seriously. That's how we ended up here. For the first time since they'd met, Prince Valerix laughed. Actually laughed. Not the theatrical boom from before. A real, genuine laugh. I suppose that's fair. They'd been in empty space for 6 hours when the proximity alarm chirped. Jake was awake instantly, which was a reflex you didn't lose even after leaving active service. Valerix was dozing in the co-pilot seat, looking significantly less regal without the cape, and with his armor still scuffed from their crawl through the recycling tunnels. "We've got company," Jake said, pulling up the sensor display. Valerix jolted awake, hand immediately going to his sword. Then he stopped, remembered the lessons from the past few hours, and instead looked at the tactical readout like Jake had shown him. One ship. Looks like a diplomatic courier. Could be station security tracking us down. Could be more assassins with better ships. Either way, they found us. What do? We wait. Let them make the first move. Running makes us look guilty. Standing our ground makes us look confident. Jake pulled up the comm system. Also, we answer when they call, because ignoring people just makes them more aggressive. The comm crackled to life right on cue. Commander Reese's voice filled the cockpit, sounding tired and extremely done with everything. "Brennan, please tell me the Crown Prince of the Kryn Empire is alive and relatively unharmed." Jake clicked the response. "He's alive. Define relatively unharmed." "His government is threatening to declare war on 3 different species. The Galactic confluence is in complete chaos, and Ambassador Fleck has been arrested for conspiracy to commit assassination. So I need confirmation that Prince Valerix is intact enough to make a statement." Valerix leaned toward the comm. "This is Prince Valerix. I am unharmed, thanks to my bodyguard's intervention. Commander Reese, what is the current situation?" There was a pause. When Reese spoke again, she sounded surprised. "Your Highness, good to hear your voice. The situation is contained. We have 12 suspects in custody, including Fleck's entire security team. Turns out insulting a Grolvian ambassador's family is a capital offense in their culture. He took out a contract on you within 20 minutes of your first conversation." "I see." Valerix glanced at Jake, who was very carefully not saying "I told you so." "And the status of the summit?" "Postponed indefinitely, which, honestly, is probably for the best. You managed to offend more delegates in 4 hours than most people manage in their entire careers. That's almost impressive, Your Highness." Valerix had the decency to look embarrassed. "Perhaps my diplomatic approach requires refinement." "Perhaps." Reese's tone suggested she was choosing her words carefully. "Your government has sent a full security detachment to escort you home. They should arrive at your location in approximately 3 hours. Until then, stay put, and try not to antagonize anyone else." "Understood, Commander, and thank you for your assistance." "Don't thank me. Thank Brennan. He's the one who kept you breathing." The line went quiet for a moment. "Brennan, you still there?" "Right here, Commander." "That was good work tonight. Messy, unauthorized, and technically you stole a ship from my station, but good work. The Kryn Empire has expressed their gratitude. Apparently, Prince Valerix personally requested that you receive full diplomatic immunity for the station security violations and a formal commendation." Jake raised an eyebrow at Valerix, who suddenly found the bulkhead very interesting to look at. "Appreciated, Commander. Tell the Prince's security detail we'll be waiting." "Will do." "Reese out." The comm clicked off. Silence filled the cockpit, broken only by the ambient hum of the ship's systems. "A commendation," Jake said finally. "Very generous of you, Your Highness. It seemed appropriate. You saved my life multiple times. You also taught me that everything I thought I knew about combat was essentially performance art." Valerix turned to face him fully. "I meant what I said earlier. I want you as my personal security chief. Name your price." Jake had been expecting this. He'd gotten similar offers before. They always came after someone nearly died and realized their current security wasn't cutting it. "Can't do it, Your Highness. I'll triple whatever you're currently making. Full diplomatic status, quarters in the royal palace, access to the finest training facilities in the Empire." "Still can't do it." Valerix looked genuinely confused. "Why not? Is the offer insufficient?" "I can arrange for..." "It's not about money." Jake stood, moved to the viewport where stars streaked past in the endless dark. "I don't do permanent positions anymore. I learned that in the Peacekeeper Corps. You tie yourself to one person, one place, one job, and eventually you stop thinking clearly. You start making emotional decisions instead of tactical ones. That's how people die. But surely, Your Highness, I'm good at what I do because I can walk away. I assess the situation, keep people alive, and then I leave before I start caring too much about whether they learn from the experience. He turned back to Valerix. You seem like a decent person under all the royal posturing. I don't want to be around to see if that changes when you're back in your comfortable palace, surrounded by people telling you how special you are. Valerix was quiet. He looked down at his ornate sword, then back at Jake. What if I told you I don't want to go back to being that person? The one who insults ambassadors and thinks ceremonial weapons make him a warrior? Then I'd say that's great. Stick with it. But you don't need me for that. You just need to remember what it felt like crawling through those recycling tunnels. Keep that feeling. Let it remind you that titles don't stop plasma bolts. You're refusing. I'm refusing a permanent position. But Jake considered it. I'll go on retainer. You get into trouble, you call me. I show up, handle it, and then leave before your government tries to give me a medal or whatever. Fair? A slow smile crossed Valerix's crystalline features. You truly are the most stubborn human I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. It was intended as one. Valerix extended his hand, a human gesture that Jake appreciated. They shook. The prince's grip was strong, confident, different from the theatrical royal Jake had met 8 hours ago. Very well, retainer status. But I have conditions. Of course you do. First, you actually teach me real combat, not just the basics. Everything. Second, you help me develop better diplomatic strategies that don't involve insulting people's relatives. And third, Valerix gestured at the worn combat knife still strapped to Jake's belt. You tell me the real story behind that blade, not just the number, the actual story. Jake, he looked at the knife. 47 people, 47 stories. Some of them he tried to forget. Some of them he couldn't forget, even if he tried. That's a lot of stories, Your Highness. We have 3 hours before my security detail arrives. Start with your favorite. Jake laughed despite himself. He moved back to his seat, settling in. All right. There was this warlord on Kepler 442b. Called himself the Crimson Fang. Had this massive energy axe that he claimed had cleaved through 100 opponents. Very impressive weapon. Very impressive title. Also very dead now. What happened? He made the same mistake everyone makes. He thought humans fight fair. He challenged me to single combat, all formal and traditional. Drew his weapon, started a speech about honor and destiny. Jake smiled at the memory. I shot him in the knee before he finished his second sentence. His own guards were so shocked by the breach of protocol that I'd disarmed 3 of them before they even processed what happened. Valerix's eyes widened. That's pragmatic. That's human. We don't have codes of honor written by people who never had to actually fight for survival. We have one rule: win, however necessary. Jake leaned back, getting comfortable. The Crimson Fang lived, by the way. I was protecting a diplomat who needed him for negotiations, but his reputation never recovered. Hard to be a feared warlord when everyone knows a human took you down with a cheap shot in under 10 seconds. And the other 46? Some similar, some different. There was a pirate queen who tried to board my ship with a crew of 20. That was a fun afternoon. Then there was the duel on Titan Station where I fought a champion who'd never lost in 300 matches. He had plasma claws built into his armor. Very intimidating. Also very predictable once you realized he only knew 5 attack patterns. Valerix listened, genuinely interested. No theatrical reactions. No royal posturing. Just a person, trying to understand a completely different approach to survival. You know what the real lesson is? Jake said after finishing another story. It's not about the weapon. It's not about training or titles or how many fights you've won. It's about adaptability. Every single one of those 47 people had a plan. They had strategies and weapons and confidence. But when the situation changed, when things didn't go according to their expectations, they couldn't adjust. That's what killed them, not me. Their own inability to adapt. And humans are good at adapting. Humans are excellent at adapting. It's what we do. Earth didn't give us claws or armor or energy projection. It gave us brains that can rewire themselves on the fly. You know what's terrifying about humanity? We can learn any combat style, master any weapon, adopt any tactic. We're not locked into one approach. We're not bound by tradition. We just do whatever works. Valerix nodded slowly, processing. That's why you yawned. What? In the banquet hall, when the assassins attacked. I drew my sword, struck my pose, prepared for honorable combat. and you yawned. Because you'd already assessed the situation, identified the threats, and knew exactly how to handle it. My theatrical response was irrelevant. Pretty much, yeah. That must have looked ridiculous to you. Jake grinned. Your Highness, it looked exactly like something a prince who'd never been in real danger would do. Which, to be fair, is what you were. But you learned fast. You didn't argue when I said run. You followed instructions. You listened. A lot of royals can't do that. Their ego gets in the way. My ego still got in the way. I just learned to fear death more than embarrassment. Hey, that's progress. Self-awareness is the first step. The proximity alarm chirped again. Different tone. Multiple ships this time. Jake checked the display. That'll be your security detail. Right on time. Very professional. Valeric stood, straightened his ruined armor as much as possible. He looked at Jake with something that might have been respect or might have been the beginning of friendship. Hard to tell with Kryn facial expressions. Brennan, thank you. For keeping me alive. For teaching me. For not letting me be the fool I was determined to be. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you actually apply the lessons. Jake stood as well, extended his hand again. And Your Highness? When you get home, maybe consider apologizing to the Centaurian ambassador. The one whose poetry you insulted. That's fixable. Start there. Apologize. Valeric said it like he was testing the word. You know, that's not something I've done often. Yeah, I figured. Consider it lesson 4. Sometimes the strongest tactical move is admitting you were wrong. Costs nothing. Gains you allies. Very human approach. Very human indeed. The escort ships were signaling for docking clearance. Jake granted it, watching as the royal security vessels moved into formation around his battered freighter. They were sleek, powerful, and probably had better coffee makers than his entire ship was worth. They're ready for you, Your Highness. Try not to start any wars on the trip home. I'll do my best. Valerix moved toward the airlock, then paused. The retainer. I'm serious about that. You'll hear from me again. I figured. Just maybe wait a few months. Let things cool down. Give yourself time to practice not insulting people. Agreed. Valerix smiled. That same genuine smile from earlier. And Brennan? Next time we meet, I want to hear the other 46 stories. Deal. Now get out of here before your security team decides I kidnapped you. Valerix left, boarding the royal transport with significantly more humility than he'd arrived with. Jake watched the ships depart, their engines flaring bright against the darkness of space. He was alone again. Just him and his battered freighter and the endless black. He pulled up the navigation console, considered his options. Lots of stations needed security. Lots of people needed protecting. The galaxy was full of opportunities for someone who knew how to keep people alive despite their best efforts to get themselves killed. His comm pinged. A message from Valerix, already transmitted from the royal ship. Lesson 5. Humans also need to learn when to accept help. The retainer contract and payment have been forwarded to your accounts. Call it insurance for when I inevitably annoy someone else with lethal resources. Also, the formal apology to the Centaurian ambassador has been drafted. You were right. It costs nothing and gains allies. Perhaps humans are onto something with this pragmatism approach. Until next time, Brennan. Try not to get yourself killed. V. Jake read it twice, then actually laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Damn it, he muttered to himself. I might actually like that guy. He pulled up a star chart, picked a direction at random, and engaged the jump drive. The universe folded around him, and Jake Brennan disappeared into the black, ready for whatever came next. Because that's what humans did. They adapted. They survived. And occasionally, they taught overly dramatic alien princes that sometimes the best weapon wasn't the fanciest one passed down through 17 generations. Sometimes the best weapon was just knowing when to duck, when to shoot, and when to use the butter knife.